I arrived home unannounced to find my wife sleeping on the doormat in the freezing rain, wearing rags. My son-in-law wiped his muddy designer shoes on her sleeve and laughed, telling his wealthy guests she was just the crazy maid who liked to sleep outside like a dog. I did not scream. I stepped out of the shadows, and the laughter died instantly because he was wearing the $1,200 shoes I bought him, but he was about to pay a price higher than his life. If you are listening to this and you think you know the people you love, take a second look. My name is Harrison Prescott. I am 72 years old, and for 40 years I ran one of the largest logistics networks on the East Coast. I know how to move cargo across oceans, and I know how to spot a bad deal from a mile away. But the worst deal I ever made was trusting my family. The rain was hammering against the roof of the taxi as we pulled up the long gravel driveway of the estate in the Hamptons. My chest still burned with a dull, throbbing ache, a reminder of the triple bypass surgery I had undergone secretly in a private clinic in Zurich 6 months ago. I had told no one about the severity of my condition, not my wife Beatrice, not my daughter Emily, and certainly not Braden, my son-in-law. I wanted to protect them from worry. I wanted to handle it alone like I handled everything in my life. I paid the driver in cash and told him to keep the change. I stood there for a moment in the darkness, letting the cold rain soak into my coat. I looked up at the house. I bought this property 3 years ago for $4.5 million. It was a gift for Emily, but mostly it was intended as a sanctuary for Beatrice and me in our twilight years. It was supposed to be quiet. It was supposed to be a home. But tonight, the windows were blazing with light. The bass from a sound system rattled the double oak front doors. Expensive cars lined the driveway like a showroom. Ferraris, Porsches, Bentleys. It looked like a nightclub, not a home. I felt a surge of irritation. I had explicitly told Braden no parties while I was gone. I wanted Beatrice to have peace. I limped toward the front porch. My legs were still weak from months of bed rest and physical therapy. The wind howled off the Atlantic Ocean, cutting through my clothes. As I climbed the stone steps, I saw a bundle of something lying on the welcome mat right next to the door. At first I thought it was a pile of old laundry, or maybe a large dog bed that had been left out in the storm. I moved closer, squinting through the rain. The bundle moved. It shivered. I froze. It was a person. A small, frail person curled into a fetal position, trying desperately to conserve heat. They were covered in a dirty, oversized gray sweatshirt that looked like it had been pulled from a dumpster. The person was clutching something tightly to their chest. I knelt down, ignoring the sharp pain in my surgical scars. I reached out a trembling hand and pulled back the hood of the sweatshirt. The air left my lungs. It was Beatrice, my wife of 50 years, the woman who had stood by my side when I was a truck driver earning minimum wage, the woman who wore pearls with the grace of a queen. She was unrecognizable. Her silver hair was matted and filthy. Her face was gaunt, the skin stretched tight over her cheekbones like parchment paper. She smelled of urine and old garbage. Her lips were blue from the cold. "Beatrice," I whispered, my voice cracking. She did not open her eyes. She whimpered and pulled the object in her hands closer. I saw what it was. It was a heel of stale bread, hard as a rock. She was holding it like it was a diamond. "Beatrice, it is me. It is Harrison." She flinched away from my touch. She muttered something incoherent, a string of terrified sounds that made no sense. She did not know who I was. She looked at me with the eyes of a hunted animal. Before I could process the horror of what I was seeing, the heavy oak front doors swung open. A wave of warmth and loud jazz music rolled out onto the porch. Laughter spilled out with it. I instinctively pulled back into the shadows of the large stone pillar by the door. Braden stepped out. He looked impeccable. He was wearing a navy blue Italian suit that I knew cost $3,000 because I had paid the credit card bill. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand and a Cuban cigar in the other. Behind him were 3 men and 2 women, all dressed in evening wear, holding champagne flutes. Braden took a deep breath of the night air, smiling like he owned the world. "Great party, Braden," one of the men said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You really outdid yourself this time. The real estate market must be booming." Braden laughed. "You know me. I have the golden touch." He took a step forward, and then he looked down. He saw Beatrice curled up on the mat. He did not look surprised. He did not look concerned. He looked annoyed. He looked at my wife the way you look at a piece of gum stuck to the pavement. "Ugh, watch your step, folks," Braden said loudly, his voice dripping with mock apology. He lifted his right foot. He was wearing the limited edition loafers I had given him for Christmas. They were made of soft calfskin. And then right in front of my eyes, he placed the sole of his shoe on the shoulder of my wife's dirty sweatshirt. He dragged his foot down her arm, wiping the mud from the garden off his shoe and onto her clothes. "Braden, what is that?" one of the women asked, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Is that a person?" Braden laughed again. "Oh, don't pay any attention to that. That is just the old maid. She is completely senile, crazy as a bat. She refuses to sleep inside. She thinks she is a guard dog or something. We let her sleep out here because she ruins the furniture." The guests chuckled nervously. "She looks hungry," the woman said. "She is fine," Braden said, taking a sip of his scotch. "She likes it. It is part of her condition. Come on, let us go by the pool. I want to show you the plans for the new wing I am building." He kicked Beatrice lightly in the ribs. Not hard enough to break a bone, but hard enough to say move. "Get out of the way, you old hag," Braden hissed. Beatrice let out a small cry and scrambled backward on her hands and knees, pressing herself against the brick wall, trying to make herself invisible. My vision went red. A cold, dark rage flooded my veins, replacing the weakness in my body. I forgot about the pain in my chest. I forgot about the cane I was using. I felt the strength of the man who used to load cargo ships with his bare hands return to me. I stepped out from behind the pillar. The porch light hit my face. Braden was mid-laugh, turning back to his guests. He froze. The cigar slipped from his fingers and hit the stone floor with a soft hiss. The color drained from his face so fast, it looked like his blood had evaporated. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The guests stopped laughing. They looked from Braden to me, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The music from inside seemed to fade into the background. I stood there, the rain dripping from the brim of my hat onto my face. I looked at my wife cowering against the wall, clutching her piece of bread. And then I looked at the man I had welcomed into my family. I did not shout. I did not scream. My voice was low, calm, and terrifyingly steady. "Braden," I said. He took a stumbling step back, almost tripping over Beatrice. "H. Harrison," he stammered. "Dad, you are supposed to be in Switzerland. You are supposed to be dead." I finished the sentence for him in my head, because that is what he looked like. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. I looked down at his feet. "Those loafers cost $1,200, Braden," I said. He looked down at his shoes, then back up at me, his eyes wide with panic. "But the price you are about to pay for what you just did," I continued, taking a step closer, "will be more expensive than your life." The glass of scotch slipped from his hand and shattered on the porch, sending shards of crystal and amber liquid everywhere. Emily, my daughter, appeared in the doorway behind him. She was wearing a diamond necklace that had belonged to Beatrice. When she saw me, she grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing. "Daddy," she whispered. I looked at her. I looked at the diamonds around her neck. And then I looked back at her mother shivering in the mud. "Get inside," I said. "The party is over." Braden moved faster than a striking cobra, the fear on his face vanishing instantly, replaced by a mask of concern so thick it was suffocating. He rushed past me, scooping Beatrice up from the cold stone, as if he had not just kicked her ribs a moment ago. "Dad! Oh my God! Dad, why did you not tell us you were coming?" He shouted, his voice pitching up into a performance of frantic worry. He turned to the stunned guests who were still holding their champagne flutes in the doorway. My father-in-law, the surgery affects his memory. He gets confused, he wanders. He looked down at Beatrice, cradling her dirty head against his expensive suit without flinching at the smell. And Mom, "Oh, Beatrice, you naughty girl. You know the doctor said 20 minutes for the cold therapy, not an hour." He looked at me with wide, innocent eyes that chilled my blood. "It is a new holistic treatment, Harrison, for her circulation. She insists on doing it outside on the stone. We can barely stop her." I stood there leaning on my cane, watching him. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He was rewriting reality in real time, covering his cruelty with a veneer of medical care. "Come inside," Braden urged, gesturing to the guests to clear a path. "You must be freezing. Let us get you warmed up." We moved inside. The heat hit me first, a blast of artificial warmth, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and stale alcohol. I looked around the great room. My room. My house. But it was not my house anymore. The hand-carved mahogany furniture I had imported from Italy, specifically for this space, was gone. The oil paintings of the Hudson River Valley that I had collected for 30 years were missing. In their place were gaudy gold-plated statues and white leather sofas that looked like they belonged in a Miami nightclub, not a family estate. The walls had been repainted a jarring electric blue. My legacy had been stripped to the studs and replaced with cheap flash. Emily, my daughter, stood by the marble fireplace. She was shaking slightly, her hand gripping a fresh glass of wine so hard her knuckles were white. I looked at her throat. The diamond choker. The vintage Cartier piece I had bought Beatrice for our 40th anniversary. It was worth $50,000, and it was resting on Emily's neck. She saw me looking at it. Her hand flew up to cover the diamonds, but she did not take it off. She could not even look me in the eye. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You look thin. Where is my furniture?" "Emily." I asked, my voice calm, but inside I was screaming. "Where are your mother's doctors? Why does she look like a concentration camp survivor?" Braden interrupted before she could answer, gently, depositing Beatrice onto one of the white sofas, where she curled up, immediately muddying the leather. "We redecorated. Dad modernized the place to increase the property value. You know how the market is. And the doctors, they are expensive frauds. We are treating her holistically now. Kale smoothies and fresh air. It is much better for her spirit." He was smiling, that salesman smile, the one he used to close deals on condos that did not exist yet. I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers closed around the cold metal of my phone. I needed the police. I needed an ambulance. I needed to get Beatrice out of this house before morning. "I am calling the authorities," I said, pulling the device out. My thumb hovering over the emergency button. "This ends now." Braden lunged. He did not strike me, he was too smart for that, with witnesses around. Instead, he grabbed my wrist with a grip of iron, squeezing a pressure point that made my fingers go numb. He wrenched the phone from my hand with a speed that belied his drunkenness. "No, no, no," he said, shaking his head at the guests who were watching with morbid curiosity. "See the anesthesia, he is paranoid. He thinks we are enemies. It is a side effect of the bypass post-operative delirium." He slipped my phone into his own pocket, patting it securely. "I will keep this safe for you, Dad. You need rest. You are clearly not yourself." "Give me my phone, Braden," I growled, trying to stand tall, but my chest was throbbing and my legs felt like lead. "Gentlemen," Braden snapped his fingers. Two men stepped out from the hallway leading to the kitchen. They were not my security detail. I had never seen them before. They were massive, wearing ill-fitting black suits with necks as thick as tree trunks and dead eyes. They moved with the heavy grace of hired muscle. "Escort." "Mr. Prescott to his suite," Braden ordered, his voice flat. "He needs quiet, no phone, no disturbances. He is very agitated." One of the men grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep, hitting a nerve that sent a shockwave of pain down to my hand. I tried to pull away, but I was weak, too weak to fight them off. I looked at Emily. She was my flesh and blood. I had paid for her college, her wedding, her first house to you. Emily, I said, my voice rough. Stop this. Help me. She turned her back. She picked up her glass and stared into the fire, refusing to acknowledge the father being manhandled in her living room. The men did not drag me toward the grand staircase leading to the master bedroom on the second floor. They pulled me toward the narrow service door that led to the lower levels. My room is upstairs, I said, digging my heels into the plush carpet. Not anymore, Braden said, stepping close to me, his voice dropping to a whisper so only I could hear. The master suite is ours now. Dad, you get the guest quarters downstairs. It is quieter there, better for your condition. He winked, a slow, deliberate wink that told me exactly who was in charge. The guards hauled me backward. As we passed the large hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of the group. Braden looking smug, adjusting his cuffs. Emily drinking to forget. And Beatrice. Braden was holding her upright, posing as the dutiful son-in-law. As I was dragged away, our eyes met in the reflection of the glass. I searched for my wife. I searched for the woman who knew my soul. The woman who had held my hand through bankruptcy and success, through joy and grief. But there was nothing there. Her pupils were dilated to the size of saucers swallowing the iris. She did not look at me with love or even recognition. She looked at me with the blank, glassy stare of a stranger. She did not blink. She did not cry out. It was as if the woman I loved had vacated her body, leaving only a shell behind. They had not just neglected her. They had erased her. And as the basement door loomed closer, I realized with a terrifying clarity that I was now a prisoner in the empire I had built. The heavy metal door slammed shut with a finality that echoed in my bones, leaving me in near total darkness. The sound of the lock clicking into place was like a gunshot. I was alone in the cold, damp air of what used to be my wine cellar. I tried to stand, but my legs finally gave out, and I slid down the rough concrete wall, hitting the floor, with a groan that tore at my surgical stitches. The room smelled of mildew and rotting cardboard. My eyes adjusted slowly to the gloom, illuminated only by a thin sliver of light, bleeding in from the gap beneath the door. This was not the climate-controlled sanctuary I had built to house vintage Bordeaux and rare scotches. The racks were gone. The temperature control system had been ripped out. In its place were piles of broken furniture, garbage bags filled with God knows what, and the unmistakable rusted shapes of old garden tools. They had turned my wine cellar into a junk room. And now I was just another piece of trash to be stored away until needed. I sat there for a moment, breathing through the pain in my chest, trying to calm the racing of my heart, before it triggered an alarm on the internal pacemaker monitoring my recovery. I needed to think. I needed a plan. But before I could formulate a strategy, the lock clicked again. The door swung open, and a silhouette filled the frame. It was one of the guards. He was holding something, no someone. He stepped inside and unceremoniously dropped his burden onto a pile of old curtains in the corner. It was Beatrice. She landed with a soft thud, making no sound of protest, just a small whimper that broke my heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. "Sweet dreams," the guard sneered. "Don't make a mess." The door slammed shut again, plunging us back into the semi-darkness. I scrambled across the floor on my hands and knees, ignoring the sharp debris digging into my palms. "Beatrice," I whispered, reaching out until my fingers brushed the rough fabric of her sweatshirt. "Beatrice, it is me." She was shivering violently. I pulled her into my arms, trying to share whatever body warmth I had left. She felt incredibly fragile, like a bird made of hollow bones. Her skin was ice cold. "I need to check you," I said softly, keeping my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my gut. "I need to see if you are hurt." She did not resist. She was past resisting. She lay limp in my arms, staring at nothing. I carefully rolled up the sleeves of her filthy sweatshirt. In the dim light I saw them, dark purple bruises encircling her wrists. They were perfect rings, the unmistakable marks of restraints. They had been tying her up, my jaw clenched so hard I felt a tooth crack. I moved my hands to her back, checking for broken ribs from Braden's kick earlier. As I lifted the hem of her shirt, I saw the imprint, a muddy tread mark stamped clearly onto her pale skin. It was the sole of a designer loafer. Braden had branded her like cattle. I gently patted her pockets, looking for anything. A weapon, a key, a phone. My hand closed around a piece of paper that had been balled up and shoved deep into the pocket of her pants. I pulled it out and smoothed it flat on the floor, angling it toward the sliver of light under the door. The handwriting was jagged and hasty, written in red marker. It was a list. Monday, morning water, evening crusts. Tuesday, morning water, evening broth. Wednesday, fasting. At the top of the page, written in capital letters, were the words, dog menu. I stared at the paper. The letters swam before my eyes. This was not just neglect. This was systematic torture. They were starving her. They were dehumanizing her. They were treating the woman who raised their wife, the woman who signed the checks for their first cars, like a stray animal they were trying to kill without leaving a mark. I folded the paper and put it in my own pocket. This was evidence. This was the death warrant I would use to bury them when I got out of here. And I would get out. I shifted my position, leaning back against a rusted filing cabinet. I needed to contact the outside world. Braden had taken my phone, but he didn't know everything about me. He didn't know that my paranoia, a trait that had served me well in the cutthroat world of international shipping, extended to my accessories. I pulled back the cuff of my left sleeve. I was wearing a vintage Omega Seamaster, a watch I had worn for 20 years. To the naked eye, it was just a classic mechanical timepiece. But 6 months ago, before I left for Switzerland, I had it modified by a specialist in Tel Aviv. Inside the casing beneath the gears was a microtransmitter, a GPS beacon capable of sending a distress signal to my private security team in London with a single press of the crown. I verified Beatrice was asleep, her breathing shallow but steady. I brought the watch close to my face. I rotated the bezel 3 times to the left and pressed the crown down for 5 seconds. A tiny red LED, usually invisible beneath the 12 o'clock marker, should have pulsed green to indicate signal lock. It pulsed red. Pulsed once, twice, then nothing. I tried again. Red. My stomach dropped. No signal. I looked up at the ceiling. The floorboards above were vibrating. The bass from the party was getting louder, thumping like a second heartbeat. But that wasn't what was blocking the signal. A simple floor wouldn't stop a military-grade transmitter. Jammers. Braden had installed signal jammers. He had turned this house into a black site. He knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't just a greedy son-in-law seizing an opportunity. This was a calculated hostile takeover. He had isolated the house, blocked the communications, and secured the perimeter. He was running this like a prison. I lowered my wrist. Panic flared in my chest, hot and sharp. If the signal couldn't get out, no one knew I was here. My lawyer, Miss Kincaid, thought I was still in recovery in Zurich. My staff thought I was unreachable. I was a ghost. The music upstairs shifted. The heavy bass of the club music faded, replaced by the clinking of glasses and the murmur of a microphone feeding back. A speech. Someone was giving a speech. I looked around the room, searching for a weakness. The door was solid steel, reinforced. The walls were concrete foundation. But this was an old house built in the 20s. The ventilation system had been retrofitted decades ago. I spotted it in the corner near the ceiling, a metal grate covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. It was the intake vent for the old gravity furnace system. The ducts were metal, and metal carried sound. I dragged a heavy wooden crate over to the corner, wincing as the effort pulled at my chest. I climbed up, balancing precariously. I pressed my ear against the cold metal of the grate. The sound was tinny and distorted, echoing down through the aluminum tubes, but I could hear it. "To the future!" Braden's voice boomed. It sounded like he was standing right above me. He must be in the library directly overhead. "To vision. To taking what is yours." Applause rippled through the ductwork. "And specifically," Braden continued, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that carried even better than his shouting, "to the deal of the century. Ladies and gentlemen, in my hand I hold the deed to the new commercial complex in Dubai, a project fully funded by the Prescott Family Trust." My blood ran cold. The Prescott Family Trust held the bulk of my liquid assets. Hundreds of millions of dollars intended for charitable foundations and family security. It required 2 signatures to access, mine and a witness. "But Braden," a woman's voice cut in. It was Emily. She sounded drunk, her words slurring slightly. "Daddy didn't sign the release. The bank won't release the funds without the biometric authorization." I pressed my ear harder against the grate, ignoring the rust flaking into my hair. "Don't worry about Daddy, babe," Braden said. I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Daddy is downstairs, taking a very long nap." There was a pause. The guests must have moved away, or the conversation had shifted to a more private corner because the background noise faded. "What do you mean, Braden?" Emily hissed. "You said we were just going to keep him quiet until the power of attorney kicked in." "The power of attorney takes too long," Braden replied. His voice was cold now, devoid of the charm he used for his investors. "And your father is tougher than he looks. Did you see him tonight? He's lucid. He's angry. If he gets to a phone, if he gets to that shark Kincaid, we are finished. We go to jail, Emily, for fraud, for elder abuse. Do you want to go to jail? Do you want to wear orange instead of Chanel?" "No," Emily whimpered. "No, please." "Then we have to accelerate the timeline," Braden said. "I have the papers ready. The do not resuscitate order. The transfer of assets due to medical incapacitation. I just need his thumbprint. And if he doesn't want to give it..." He paused. The silence in the vent was deafening. "If he doesn't give it," Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Then we pull the plug," Braden said. "We say it was a heart complication. He just had triple bypass. It happens all the time. Old men die. Hearts fail. Who is going to question it? The doctor on my payroll certainly won't." I gripped the grate so hard my fingers turned white. He was planning to murder me. Tonight. "But he's my dad," Emily sobbed softly. "He's an obstacle, Emily," Braden snapped. "He's the only thing standing between us and $800 million. Now dry your eyes, go mingle. I'm going downstairs to have a little chat with him. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." I heard the heavy thud of footsteps walking away from the vent, then the sound of a door opening and closing upstairs. He was coming. I climbed down from the crate, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at Beatrice curled up on the pile of rags, oblivious to the fact that her husband was about to be executed. I had maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes before Braden came through that door with his fake papers and his hired muscle. 5 minutes to turn this prison into a fortress or a weapon. I looked around the room with new eyes. I didn't see junk anymore. I saw assets. I saw opportunity. I saw a glass wine bottle, heavy and thick, collecting dust in the rack. I saw a coil of rusty wire. I saw the high-voltage junction box on the wall with its cover hanging loose. I was not a helpless old man. I was Harrison Prescott. I had fought Union's pirates and corporate raiders. If Braden wanted to pull the plug, he was going to get a shock he never expected. I grabbed the wine bottle and smashed the neck against the wall, creating a jagged glass shiv. Let him come. The sunlight felt like a physical blow when the guard hauled me up the basement stairs. My eyes burned as the sterile white light of the kitchen flooded my vision. I was shoved onto a hard stool at the island, my joints screaming in protest. A plastic container slid across the quartz countertop, stopping inches from my hand. Inside was a congealed mess of risotto and shrimp tails from last night's party. It smelled of stale wine and neglect. Beside it sat a glass of tap water. "Eat," the guard grunted, leaning against the refrigerator, already bored, scrolling through his phone. Across the island, Emily sat hunched over a steaming mug of coffee. She looked wretched. Her skin was sallow, her eyes bloodshot, likely nursing a hangover from the cheap champagne Braden had been pouring like water. She wore silk pajamas that I knew cost more than my first car, yet she looked like a prisoner in her own home. "Emily," I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. "Where is your mother?" She didn't look up. She stared into the black liquid in her mug. "She's in the garden. She likes the rain." Lies. They had left her out in the storm again. Rage flared in my chest, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed clarity. I needed an opening. Suddenly, Emily stood up, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked green. Without a word, she rushed toward the powder room down the hall, retching before she even cleared the doorway. She left her iPad Pro sitting on the counter. The screen was still glowing. I looked at the guard. He was laughing at something on his phone, completely checked out. This was it. I leaned forward, feigning a cough to cover the sound of the tablet sliding across the smooth stone. I pulled it close, shielding it with my body. My fingers hovered over the screen. Passcode. I didn't need to guess. Emily had used the same code since high school. 1990, her birth year. The device unlocked. I didn't go to email. I didn't check the news. I went straight to the browser and typed in the URL for Zurich Private Bank. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a focused, lethal adrenaline. I entered my username. The password was a string of alphanumeric characters based on the hull numbers of my first 3 cargo ships, a sequence I had memorized 20 years ago. The page loaded. The spinning wheel seemed to mock me for an eternity. Then the dashboard appeared. The air left my lungs. Where there should have been a balance of over $15 million in liquid assets, there was a single digit. 0. Actually, it was worse. It was negative. Overdraft fees. I tapped the transaction history, my eyes scanning the carnage. It was a bloodbath. Transfers of 500,000, 1 million, 2 million. All executed in the last 6 months. All authorized with a digital signature that looked exactly like mine. The destinations were a laundry list of the untraceable. Crypto.com. Binance. A dozen offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands with names like Blue Horizon and Shadow Corp. They hadn't just stolen the money. They had laundered it, scattering my life's work into the digital wind. $15 million. Gone. My chest tightened. That money was the foundation. It was the pension fund for my employees. It was the security for Beatrice. "Looking for something, Dad?" The voice was smooth, mocking. I didn't have time to close the tab. Braden walked into the kitchen, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance. He looked fresh, rested, wearing a polo shirt that showed off his gym-sculpted arms. He walked right up to me and plucked the tablet from my hands, as easily as taking candy from a baby. "You shouldn't be looking at screens," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "The blue light is bad for your recovery. The doctor said you need mental rest. You stole $15 million. I said, my voice low, deadly steady. "You drained the accounts. You emptied the trust." Braden laughed. He walked to the coffee machine and poured himself a cup using my favorite mug. "Stole is such a harsh word, Harrison. I prefer reallocated. And besides, I didn't steal anything. You gave it to me." He reached into a leather portfolio sitting on the counter and pulled out a document. He slid it across the quartz. "Do you recognize this?" I looked down. It was a durable power of attorney. It granted Braden full legal authority over my finances, my medical decisions, and my assets. At the bottom was my signature. It wasn't a forgery. It was my handwriting, shaky weak, but mine. I remember. I whispered, the memory clawing its way through the fog of the past. The night before the surgery, in the hotel, you said it was a hospital release form. You said they needed it just in case. And you signed it, Braden said, taking a sip of coffee. You trusted me. And the best part? The incapacitation clause. It covers mental confusion, paranoia, post-operative delirium. All things you are currently suffering from according to the doctor on my payroll. Legally, Harrison, you are incompetent. I am not stealing from you. I am your guardian. He leaned in close, his smile vanishing. I own you. I own your money. I own this house. You are just a guest here. A guest we can evict whenever we want. You think you've won, I said, meeting his gaze. But you moved too fast. The IRS flags transfers over $10,000. You moved millions. The paper trail will hang you. The accounts are in your name, Harrison. Braden countered, his eyes cold. The transfers were authorized by your signature. If anyone goes to jail for tax evasion, it will be you. The senile old tycoon trying to hide his assets before he dies. He laughed again, a cruel, sharp sound. But don't worry about the money, Dad. The money is the least of your problems. You should be more worried about your legacy. He reached into the portfolio again. This time he pulled out a newspaper. It was an old issue of the Wall Street Journal, folded open to the business section. He tossed it onto the counter right on top of the cold risotto. Read it, he commanded. I looked down. The headline screamed up at me in bold black letters. My heart stopped. My company, the business I had built from a single truck into a global empire. The company that fed 5,000 families. CEO Braden Miller cites gross mismanagement by founder Harrison Prescott and hidden debts as the cause of the collapse. The subheadline read, Assets to be liquidated. I felt the room spin. He hadn't just stolen my cash. He had burned my company to the ground. He had destroyed my name. You killed it, I whispered. You killed my company. I stripped it, Braden corrected. I sold the ships. I sold the warehouses. I liquidated everything that wasn't nailed down and funneled it into new ventures. Prescott Logistics is a husk, Harrison, and the world blames you. You are going down in history as a failure, he signaled to the guard. Take him back downstairs. He looks like he's lost his appetite. The guard grabbed my arm, hauling me off the stool. I clutched the newspaper like a shield as I was dragged away. Braden turned his back on me, pulling out his phone. Yes, I'm looking at the Bentley now, in black. He thought I was broken. He thought I was finished. But as the basement door loomed, a cold resolve settled over me. He had taken everything I had to lose, which meant I had nothing left to hold me back. He had created a monster, and soon he would meet it. The afternoon sun beat down on the back of my neck with a cruelty that felt personal. I was on my knees in the dirt of my own backyard, holding a rusty trowel that Braden had tossed at my feet an hour ago. He had told me that if I wanted to eat dinner tonight, I had to earn my keep. He said the rose bushes needed pruning and the weeds were out of control. It was a lie, of course. He didn't care about the roses. He just wanted to see Harrison Prescott, the man who once commanded fleets of container ships, crawling in the mud like a peasant. I dug into the hard, dry earth, wincing as the motion pulled at the scar tissue on my chest. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. 10 feet away, Beatrice sat on the grass. She was staring at a line of ants marching across a stone paver, her expression vacant and lost. She was wearing the same filthy sweatshirt, and she was humming a discordant tune that had no melody. I crawled over to her, dragging my stiff leg. The guard stationed by the back door was busy flirting with one of the housemaids and wasn't paying attention to us. Beatrice, I whispered, wiping a smudge of soil from her cheek with my thumb. It is me. It is Harrison. Look at me. She didn't blink. She continued to watch the ants rocking back and forth slightly. Her eyes were glazed over a milky film of dissociation that made her look like a doll left out in the rain. I felt a surge of despair so black it almost swallowed me whole. They had broken her. They had taken my brilliant, vibrant wife and turned her into this shell. I reached for her hand, intending to squeeze it to offer some small comfort in this hell we were living in. As my fingers closed around hers, her humming stopped abruptly. Her hand, which had been limp a moment ago, suddenly gripped mine with a strength that shocked me. It was a vice grip, sharp and desperate. I froze. I looked at her face. Her expression hadn't changed. She was still staring at the ants. Her mouth was still slack. But her eyes had shifted. For a split second, the fog cleared. The vacancy vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp clarity that I remembered from 40 years of marriage. She wasn't looking at me directly. She was too smart for that, knowing we were being watched, but she was present. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't senile. She was playing the role of a lifetime. She was surviving the only way a defenseless woman could in a house full of wolves. She had made herself invisible by making herself pathetic. Harrison, she breathed. The word was barely a ghost of a sound, not even a whisper, just a shaping of air. I leaned in closer, pretending to adjust the collar of her shirt, shielding our faces from the guard. "I am here, Beatrice," I murmured. "I am going to get us out." "False bottom," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "In the study. The safe. 24-10-85. My heart hammered against my ribs. 24-10-85. October 24th, 1985. Our wedding anniversary. She knew. She knew about the new safe Braden had installed. She had been watching him, listening to him, while he treated her like furniture. She had gathered intel while they mocked her. "Don't react," she hissed, the old steel returning to her voice. "They are watching. He is drowning Harrison. He is scared." Before I could ask what she meant, she let out a loud wailing moan and pulled her hand away from me, flapping her arms as if she were chasing away invisible flies. She went back to rocking back to the vacant stare, back to being the crazy old maid. I sat back on my heels, stunned. My wife was a warrior. She had just handed me a weapon. I looked up toward the house. The French doors to the terrace swung open, and Braden stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual smirk. He was wearing a bathrobe that looked disheveled, and his hair was messy. He held a phone to his ear, his knuckles white as he gripped the device. He didn't see us, or he didn't care. He paced the length of the slate patio, aggressively kicking a patio chair out of his way. I watched him closely. I had spent decades negotiating with union leaders, corrupt port officials, and hostile board members. I knew how to read body language. I knew the difference between a man who was in control and a man who was cornered. Braden was cornered. He was sweating despite the cool ocean breeze. He was gesturing wildly with his free hand. I dragged myself a few feet closer, moving behind a large hydrangea bush, pretending to pull weeds from the roots. I needed to hear him. "I don't have it today," Braden shouted into the phone, his voice cracking. "The transfer is delayed. The bank flagged it. I need more time." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. His face went pale, a sickly gray color that looked terrible in the sunlight. No, you can't do that," Braden pleaded, his arrogance evaporating. "Listen to me. I have the assets. I have the house. I have the old man's portfolio. It's liquid. I just need to wash it. Give me 48 hours. Please. Just 48 hours, and I will pay you double the vigorish." He stopped again. He was listening to a threat. I could tell by the way his shoulders hunched, by the way he instinctively brought his hand up to cover his throat. "I will get it," Braden whispered, now terrified. "I swear. Do not touch her. Do not touch Emily. I will get you the cash." He ended the call and stood there shaking, staring at the phone in his hand like it was a bomb. Then he turned and hurled the device across the patio. It shattered against the stone wall. He gripped the railing of the terrace, breathing hard, looking out toward the ocean. I stayed hidden behind the hydrangea, my mind racing. I began to do the math. The terrible, ruthless math of the criminal underworld. I had seen the accounts. Braden had drained $15 million of liquid cash. He had liquidated the company assets for probably another 20 or 30 million. He had access to a fortune. A man with $40 million at his disposal doesn't beg for 48 hours. A man with that kind of cash doesn't scream about paying double the interest. A man who has successfully stolen an empire doesn't look like he is about to vomit from fear. Unless the money was already gone. All of it. It didn't make sense. You can't spend $40 million in 6 months on cars and parties. Even with his lavish lifestyle, the math didn't add up. Unless he wasn't spending it. Unless he was paying for a mistake. Crypto. I remembered the transaction logs, the transfers to Binance and the offshore shells. He hadn't just been hiding the money. He had been investing it, gambling it. I knew the market. I knew that 6 months ago, a lot of amateur investors had leveraged themselves to the hilt, betting on speculative coins that had since crashed to zero. Braden, the arrogant real estate agent who thought he was a financial genius, had likely leveraged my fortune on a sure thing that had imploded. But banks don't threaten to hurt your wife. Banks send foreclosure notices. Braden wasn't borrowing from banks. When the market crashed and he lost my money, he must have tried to chase his losses. He must have borrowed to cover the margin calls. And when traditional lenders said no, he went to the lenders who didn't ask for credit scores. He went to the lenders who asked for collateral in blood. He owed the mob, or a cartel, or someone even worse. That was why he needed to kill me. That was why he needed the trust fund released immediately. He wasn't trying to get rich anymore. He was trying to stay alive. He was a drowning man, dragging my entire family down into the abyss with him. I looked at Beatrice. She had been right. He was drowning. Suddenly, the gravel of the driveway crunched loudly. It wasn't the sound of a delivery truck or a guest's sports car. It was heavy tires. I looked toward the side gate. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows rolled slowly up the drive. It didn't have license plates. It looked like a hearse designed for the living. It stopped right in front of the main entrance, blocking the path. The engine idled, a low, menacing rumble that vibrated through the ground. Braden froze on the terrace. He stared at the SUV, his eyes wide with horror. He looked like a rabbit caught in the shadow of a hawk. The driver's door didn't open. The passenger door didn't open. Instead, the rear window rolled down slowly. A man sat in the back seat. He was wearing sunglasses even though the day was overcast. His arm rested on the doorframe. I could see the ink. Dense tribal tattoos winding down his forearm, covering his wrist, extending onto the back of his hand. He didn't say a word. He didn't gesture. He just took off his sunglasses and looked up at Braden on the balcony. His eyes were dead cold voids. He held Braden's gaze for 10 long seconds. It was a message, a silent, terrifying confirmation. We know where you live. We know you are home. Time is up. The window rolled back up. The SUV reversed slowly, deliberately, kicking up dust, and then drove away down the lane, disappearing behind the manicured hedges. Braden collapsed onto a patio chair, burying his face in his hands. I looked at the gate where the car had vanished. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the wind. The wolves weren't just inside the house anymore. They were at the door, and Braden had just invited them in. I looked back at Beatrice. She gave me a tiny, imperceptible nod. Tonight. It had to be tonight. I had the code. I had the motivation. And now I knew exactly who the real enemy was. I wasn't just fighting a greedy son-in-law. I was fighting for our lives against a clock that was ticking down to zero. I stood up, clutching the trowel. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I was ready to dig, but not for weeds. I was digging for the truth that would bury Braden forever. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times, deep and mournful vibrations that seemed to shake the dust off the floorboards. I waited for the echo to die down. The house was finally silent. The guard Braden had posted at the top of the basement stairs was a heavy sleeper. I had listened to his breathing shift from the rhythm of a conscious man to the deep, rattling snore of the exhausted for the last hour. He was sprawled in a chair by the kitchen door, probably dreaming of how he would spend the money Braden didn't have to pay him. I pushed the basement door open. It moved silently on the hinges I had greased earlier, with a dab of cooking oil I'd scavenged from the trash. I stepped out into the hallway barefoot. My shoes would have been too loud on the hardwood floors. The cold varnish bit into my soles, but I didn't care. I moved through the shadows of my own home like a burglar, ghosting past the new gaudy sculptures and the overpriced vases Braden had bought to replace my life. The study was on the first floor down the east wing. It had been my sanctuary for 30 years, a place of oak and leather and the smell of old paper. Now, as I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me, it smelled of stale cigar smoke and fear. I didn't turn on the light. The moonlight filtering through the heavy velvet drapes was enough. I moved to the desk. It was a monstrosity of glass and chrome, completely out of place in the room. I ignored it and went straight to the built-in bookshelves on the far wall. Beatrice had been right. The false bottom was in the cabinet where I used to keep my nautical charts. I knelt down, my knees popping audibly in the silence. I prayed no one heard. I felt along the bottom of the shelf until my fingers found the hidden catch. It clicked. The panel swung open, revealing the cold steel face of a wall safe. It wasn't the old analog safe I had used. This was new, digital, state-of-the-art. Braden must have had it installed the week I left for Zurich. I stared at the keypad. The numbers glowed a faint, menacing blue. 24, 10, 85. Our wedding anniversary. October 24th, 1985, Beatrice had given me the key to my own salvation. I reached out my hand, trembling slightly, not from age, but from a cold, focused rage. I punched in the numbers. 2, 4, 1, 0, 8, 5. The mechanism whirred. A small green light flashed. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical thud that sounded like a thunderclap in the quiet room. I held my breath, waiting for an alarm, waiting for footsteps. Nothing. I pulled the heavy door open. I expected to see stacks of cash. I expected to see the $15 million he had drained from my accounts, maybe converted into gold or diamonds or bearer bonds. I expected to see the loot of a thief who had successfully pulled off the heist of the century. The safe was empty of treasure. It was stuffed with paper. I reached in and pulled out a stack of documents bound with a rubber band. I moved to the window using a sliver of moonlight to read. The first document was a promissory note. It wasn't from a bank. It was handwritten on a sheet of legal pad paper. I, Braden Miller, acknowledge a debt of $4 million to the Emerald Syndicate. Payment due in full by November 1st. November 1st was 3 days ago. I flipped the page. Another note. This one was typed, but the letterhead was from a shell company in Macau known for washing money for the triads. Outstanding balance $2.5 million. Interest accruing at 5% weekly. I flipped again. Gambling markers. Dozens of them. Receipts from underground casinos in Atlantic City, online betting logs showing losses that would make a Saudi prince weep. He hadn't invested my money. He hadn't bought real estate. He had torched $15 million on bad bets and high-risk poker games, trying to fill a hole inside him that no amount of money could ever fill. He wasn't a mastermind. He was a degenerate addict. My hands shook as I dug deeper into the stack. At the bottom, I found a manila folder labeled Medical, Harrison. I opened it. Inside was a psychiatric evaluation. It was dated 2 months ago. It was signed by a Dr. Aris, a name I didn't recognize. Patient Harrison Prescott. Diagnosis: advanced paranoid schizophrenia with rapid onset dementia. Patient exhibits violent tendencies, delusions of persecution, and inability to manage financial or personal affairs. Recommend immediate and permanent conservatorship. Prognosis: terminal mental decline. It was a fabrication, a complete work of fiction designed to strip me of my rights. This was the gun they were holding to my head. With this paper, they could lock me away in a facility forever. They could drug me until I really was a vegetable. They could legally kill me without ever pulling a trigger. I felt a wave of nausea. This was premeditated. This wasn't just about covering debts. This was about erasing a human being. I reached back into the safe to see if there was anything else. My fingers brushed against cold plastic. It was a phone. A cheap disposable burner phone, black and nondescript. I pulled it out. The battery was low, the screen dim. I pressed the power button. It booted up, showing a generic wallpaper. There were no apps, no contacts saved, just one message thread. I opened it. The most recent text had come in 20 minutes ago. You are out of time, Braden. We know you are in the house. We know the old man is back. We don't care about your family drama. We want our money. I scrolled up. Please, I need another day. Just one day. I have the assets locked down, Braden had replied 3 hours ago. The response from the unknown number was chilling in its simplicity. You have 24 hours. Send the coin, or we send a courier for your wife's finger. The left one, with the ring. I stared at the glowing screen. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. They weren't coming for Braden. They were coming for Emily. He had used his own wife, my daughter, as collateral for his gambling debts. He had put a price on her head to buy himself time. This was the leverage. This was the truth that would shatter the lies he had spun for her. Emily thought he was a stressed businessman protecting the family fortune. She didn't know he had sold her safety to butchers. I slipped the phone into my pocket. This was it. This was the smoking gun. With this, I could destroy him. I could show Emily exactly who she was sleeping next to. I grabbed the medical file and the debt notes, shoving them into the waistband of my trousers beneath my shirt. I had to get back to the basement. I had to hide this. I turned to leave. Click. The sound of the door latch lifting froze me in place. The library door creaked open. A shaft of light from the hallway cut across the room, blinding me for a second. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light. It was Emily. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and dark with insomnia. But it wasn't her presence that stopped my heart. It was what she was holding. In her right hand, gripped tight enough to turn her knuckles white, was a paring knife. A sharp 4-inch blade she must have taken from the wet bar. She stepped into the room, kicking the door shut behind her, with her heel plunging us back into the semi-darkness. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was trembling, fragile as glass. I stood still, my hands raised slowly. "Emily," I said softly. "It is me. Put the knife down." She didn't lower it. She raised it, pointing the tip at my chest. She looked terrifying. She looked broken. "Braden said you would try to escape," she said, tears spilling from her eyes. "He said you were having an episode. He said you might get violent. He said I had to protect the family." She took a step closer, the knife wavering in the air between us. "Emily, look at me," I said, keeping my voice level, fighting the urge to rush her. "Look at your father. Do I look crazy to you? Or do I look like a man who just found out his son-in-law sold you to the mob?" She blinked, confusion warring with the fear in her eyes. "What?" I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. "I am not the one you need to protect yourself from, Emily," I said, holding the phone out to her like an offering. "Read this." She hesitated, the knife still pointed at my heart. "Read it." I commanded, my voice sharpening with the authority I hadn't used in years. Read what your husband thinks you are worth. She reached out with her free hand, her eyes never leaving my face, and took the phone. She looked down at the screen. I watched her face as she read the message. I watched the moment her world ended. The paring knife clattered to the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed deafening in the silence of the library. It bounced once, spinning on its handle before coming to rest against the leg of the heavy oak desk. Emily did not look at it. She did not look at me. Her eyes were locked on the small, glowing screen of the burner phone in her hand. I watched the blood drain from her face. It started at her lips, turning them a pale, ghostly gray, and spread upward until she looked like a wax statue. Her breathing hitched, catching in her throat, like she had forgotten how to inhale. She read the message once. Then she read it again. I could see her eyes darting back and forth, scanning the brutal words that reduced her existence to a bargaining chip. A finger. The left one with the ring. She let out a sound that was half sob and half retch. Her knees buckled, and she slid down the front of the desk, collapsing onto the Persian rug in a heap of silk and misery. The phone slipped from her fingers and landed on the carpet. I did not move to comfort her. Not yet. The time for coddling was over. Coddling was what had gotten us here. I needed her to break completely so I could rebuild her into something stronger. "He does not love you, Emily," I said, my voice cold and hard, cutting through her sobbing. "He does not even see you. To him, you are not a wife. You are not a partner. You are a shield. You are a piece of meat he is throwing to the wolves to buy himself another 24 hours of life." She shook her head violently, her hands covering her ears, as if she could block out the truth. "No," she moaned. "No, he is stressed. He is in trouble, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't let them hurt me." "He already has," I countered, stepping closer, looming over her. "He drained $15 million from my accounts in 6 months. Do you know where that money went? It did not go into this house. It did not go into his failed real estate deals. It went into the digital void. Crypto, gambling, high-risk loans. He burned through a fortune that took me 40 years to build, and he did it with a smile on his face while he poured you cheap champagne." I kicked the knife away, sending it sliding under the sofa. "He is desperate, Emily. A desperate man has no loyalty. He has sold you. That text message is a receipt. You are the collateral for his bad bets. And when the sun comes up, if he does not have the money, they are coming for you. Not him. You." Emily looked up at me then. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. Her face was twisted in a rictus of agony, but beneath the pain I saw something else. I saw shame. Deep, corroding shame. She didn't look surprised enough. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She knew. Not about the mob, not about the finger, but she knew he was no good. She had known for a long time. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered, kneeling down so I was eye level with her. "You knew he was a fraud." Emily closed her eyes, and fresh tears squeezed out. "I knew he had someone else," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The air in the room felt suddenly heavy. "Who?" I asked. "Her name is Jessica," she said, the name tasting like poison in her mouth. "She is 22. She is his assistant. I found the messages on his iPad 3 months ago. Pictures, hotel receipts. He bought her a bracelet, a Cartier bracelet, the same one I wanted." She opened her eyes and looked at me, begging for understanding, begging for absolution. I didn't say anything, Daddy. I couldn't. Everyone thinks we are perfect. The country club, my friends. If I left him, everyone would know I failed. Everyone would know I was stupid enough to marry a con man. I just wanted to keep the peace. I thought if I ignored it, he would come back to me. I thought if we got the money from the trust, he would be happy again. She grabbed the lapels of my shirt, her grip desperate. "I let him hurt Mom," she sobbed. "I saw him push her. I saw him lock her out in the rain. And I didn't stop him because I was afraid he would leave me for her, for the assistant. I sold my own mother for a man who wants to cut off my finger. Her confession hung in the air, ugly and raw. She had traded her dignity and her parents' safety for the illusion of a happy marriage. It was pathetic. It was infuriating. And it was exactly the kind of weakness Braden had exploited. But looking at her broken on the floor, I didn't see a villain. I saw a victim. A foolish, vain victim, but my daughter nonetheless. And I would be damned if I let her die for his sins. I took her hands in mine and pulled them away from my shirt. I held them tight, forcing her to look at me. Listen to me, Emily. Listen closely. The man upstairs is not your husband. He is a parasite. And right now that parasite is hosting a party while executioners wait outside the gate. We do not have time for tears. We do not have time for regret. I picked up the burner phone and pressed it into her palm, closing her fingers around it. You have a choice, I said, my voice low and urgent. You can stay here on the floor and wait for them to come for you. You can wait for Braden to sacrifice you. Or you can stand up. You can wipe your face and you can help me kill him. Her eyes widened. Kill him. Not with a knife, I said, glancing at the weapon under the sofa. We are not savages. We are going to kill him with the one thing he fears more than death. We are going to kill him with the truth. We are going to strip him of every dollar, every lie, and every ounce of protection he thinks he has. We are going to leave him naked before the law and before the men he owes. I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that? She took a shuddering breath. She looked down at the phone, then at the door, then back at me. The trembling in her hands began to subside, replaced by a spark of anger. It was faint, but it was there. What do you need? She asked. I need to make a call, I said. Braden has jammed the signals in the house. My watch won't work. But this phone, I tapped the burner in her hand, this phone is his lifeline to the mob. He must have whitelisted it, or it is on a frequency the jammers don't block. I need to call Ms. Kincaid. I need to activate the Omega protocol. Emily nodded, wiping her face with the sleeve of her silk robe. Okay, make the call. No, I said. Not here. It is too quiet. If he checks the network logs, if he comes down, I need a distraction. I need you to go out there. I need you to be his wife one last time. I need you to keep him occupied for 10 minutes. Can you do that? Can you look at the man who sold you and smile? Emily stood up. She smoothed her robe. She adjusted her hair. She walked to the mirror in the corner and wiped the black streaks from her cheeks. When she turned back, she looked pale but composed. The mask was back in place, but this time she wasn't wearing it for him. She was wearing it for us. I can do it, she said. Her voice was cold. For Mom, and for my finger. She reached for the door handle. Boom, 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 the heavy wood of the library door shook under 3 violent impacts. Emily froze, her hand hovering inches from the brass knob. I pressed myself against the wall into the shadows behind a tall bookcase, my heart slamming against my ribs. Emily opened the door. It was Braden. His voice wasn't charming anymore. It was tight, agitated, and suspicious. I know you're in there, Emily, he shouted, pounding again. I heard voices. Who are you talking to? Open the damn door right now. He rattled the handle. It was locked from the inside. I looked at Emily. Her eyes were wide with panic. She looked at me for instruction. I put a finger to my lips and signaled for her to open it. We had no choice. If he broke it down, he would see me. If she opened it, we might have a chance to bluff. She took a deep breath. She pulled her shoulders back. She unlocked the latch. The door flew open. Braden stood there, filling the frame. He was sweating, his tie loosened, his eyes darting around the dark room. He looked past Emily, scanning the shadows. Who is in here? He demanded, pushing past her. I heard whispering. Is it the old man? Did he get out? He took a step toward the desk, toward where I was hiding. Emily stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "It was me, Braden," she said, her voice steady, loud enough to cover the sound of my breathing. I was talking to myself. I was practicing. Braden stopped and looked down at her, sneering. "Practicing what?" "Being crazy like your mother." "Practicing my toast," Emily said, lifting her chin. "For the investors. You said I had to make a speech about the Dubai project. I didn't want to embarrass you, so I came in here to rehearse." Braden stared at her, his eyes narrowing. He looked at her face, seeing the redness around her eyes. "You've been crying," he accused. "I'm stressed, Braden," she snapped. "We have a house full of people. My father is locked in the basement like an animal, and my husband is acting like a maniac. Of course I am crying, but I fixed my face. I am ready to go out there and lie for you. Again." She pushed past him, walking into the hallway. "Are you coming, or do you want to search the room for ghosts?" Braden hesitated. He looked back into the gloom of the library, his gaze lingering on the bookcase where I was pressed flat against the wall. Then he grunted and turned around. "Fine," he muttered. "But make it good. We need this money, Emily, or we are all dead." He followed her out, slamming the door behind him. I let out a breath I had been holding for a minute. My hands were shaking. That was too close. But she had done it. She had bought me time. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. It was time to make the call that would end Braden's life as he knew it. I dialed the number for Ms. Kincaid. It was 2 a.m. in London, but she would answer. She always answered. The line rang once, twice. "Hello?" The voice was crisp, alert, and sharp as a razor. "Miss Kincaid," I said. "This is Harrison Prescott. I am not dead, but I am currently in hell, and I need you to bring the cavalry." I stepped quickly into the small powder room attached to the library and engaged the heavy brass lock. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt dangerous given my condition, but I pushed the pain away. I pressed the cheap burner phone to my ear. "Mr. Prescott." The voice on the other end was breathless, stripped of its usual cool, professional detachment. "Is that really you?" The biometric voice print confirms a match, but my God, we thought you were dead. I leaned against the marble sink, staring at my gaunt reflection in the mirror. "Dead," I repeated, my voice raspy. "Is that what he told you?" "We received a death certificate 3 days ago," Kincaid said, her words coming fast, clipped with shock and fury. "Issued by a coroner in Zurich. Cause of death was listed as post-surgical cardiac arrest. Braden sent it to the firm. He demanded the immediate release of the Prescott Family Trust and the transfer of all liquid assets to his account as the sole executor of your estate." I closed my eyes. He had not just planned to kill me. He had already killed me on paper. I was a ghost haunting my own life. That was why he was so desperate. That was why he needed me to stop breathing tonight. If I showed up alive, the fraud would unravel instantly. He was trapped between a lie he had already told and a truth he couldn't bury deep enough. "He falsified a death certificate," I asked, knowing the answer. "It was a very good forgery," Kincaid replied, the steel returning to her tone. "But we flagged it. The timestamp on the digital seal was off by 2 hours. We froze the accounts pending a physical verification of the body. That is why the funds haven't cleared. That is why he is panicking. We told him the bank needed 48 hours to process the claim. We were stalling Harrison. But we didn't know you were in the house. We thought you were missing. We have investigators sweeping Zurich right now looking for your remains. He has me trapped in the Hamptons estate," I said, keeping my voice low. "He has signal jammers. He has guards. And he has a debt." I paused, taking a deep breath. "He owes $8 million to the Emerald Syndicate," I said. "He used my daughter as collateral. If he doesn't pay by sunrise, they are going to hurt her." There was a silence on the line, a cold, calculating silence that I knew well. Ms. Kincaid was not just a lawyer. She was a fixer, She was the person I called when unions threatened to shut down ports, or when pirates seized a cargo ship off the Horn of Africa. She didn't panic. She strategized. "I can have a tactical team on the ground in 40 minutes, she said. "We can breach the perimeter. We can extract you and Emily. We can have Braden in custody within the hour." "No," I said sharply. "No police. Not yet." "Harrison, he is dangerous," Kincaid argued. "He has already forged your death. He is desperate. If you send in the police or a tactical team now, he might do something stupid," I said. "He might use Emily as a shield, or worse, the syndicate might see the flashing lights and decide to cut their losses and cut Emily. We need to be smarter. We need to cut the strings." "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want to own him," I said, my voice dropping to a growl. "I want to buy the debt." "Buy the debt," Kincaid repeated, slowly processing the request. "Yes. Use the shell company in Panama, the one we use for hostile takeovers. Contact the syndicate. Offer them $10 million for the note. Cash. Immediate transfer. Tell them they walk away with a profit and no blood on their hands. Tell them the debt is now owned by the Pegasus Group." "You want to become his creditor," she realized. "I want to be the one holding the leash," I confirmed. "When the sun comes up, I don't want him fearing the mob. I want him fearing me. Can you do it?" "It will take time," she said. "To mobilize the cash, to make contact with the syndicate's broker, to get the paperwork signed. I need 12 hours, maybe 10 if I pull every string I have. And I need to get the security team into position quietly to secure the exits." "You have 12 hours, I said, looking at my watch. It was just past 2 in the morning. "But Kincaid, I need that confirmation. When I walk out there, I need to know I own him." "Consider it done," she said. "Stay safe, Harrison. Do not let him provoke you. He thinks he is fighting a corpse. Let him believe it." I ended the call. I took the SIM card out of the burner phone and flushed it down the toilet. I hid the phone itself in the water tank. I washed my face with cold water, trying to scrub away the exhaustion and the fear. I straightened my spine. I adjusted the collar of my dirty shirt. I was not a victim anymore. I was the CEO, and I was about to conduct a hostile takeover of my own home. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back into the library. The room was empty. Emily was gone. She was out there performing the role of her life, buying me time. I walked to the hallway door. I could hear the party still raging in the main hall, but the energy had changed. It was manic now, desperate. I opened the door and stepped into the corridor. Braden was standing there. He was leaning against the wall right next to the door, as if he had been waiting for me. He held a fresh glass of whiskey in his hand, but he wasn't drinking it. He was staring at the door handle, his eyes glazed and dark. When he saw me, he didn't jump. He didn't shout. He just slowly straightened up, pushing himself off the wall. He looked at me with a terrifying calmness. The panic I had seen on the terrace was gone. The fear of the mob was gone. In its place was a cold resolve. It was the look of a man who had run out of options and had decided on the only path left. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving my face. "You look tired, Dad," he said softly. "I am tired, Braden," I replied, matching his tone. "I am tired of the noise. I am tired of the lies." He nodded slowly. "I know. It is exhausting, isn't it? Trying to hold it all together. Trying to survive." He took a step toward me. He didn't look like a son-in-law anymore. He looked like an executioner. "You should go back to the basement," he said. "It is safer there. For everyone." I stood my ground, leaning on my cane. "I am done with the basement," I said. Braden smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were dead. "No, Dad," he whispered, reaching into his jacket pocket. "You are not done. Not yet. But soon. Very soon, you won't have to worry about anything ever again." He pulled his hand out of his pocket. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a small glass vial and a syringe. "It is time for your medicine," he said, taking another step. "The doctor said you need a booster for your heart to help you sleep." He wasn't waiting for the mob. He wasn't waiting for the bank. He had decided to close the loop himself. Tonight was the night I was supposed to die of natural causes. I looked at the syringe. Then I looked at him. "You are making a mistake, Braden," I said. He shook his head. "No, Dad. The only mistake was letting you come back from Zurich. But don't worry. I'm going to fix it." He lunged. The needle stopped inches from my neck because someone pounded on the hallway door. It was the catering manager looking for the host. Braden lowered the syringe with a sneer and shoved it back into his pocket, whispering that my medicine would have to wait until the encore. He had a better idea. He wanted a show. He wanted to parade his conquest before he buried it. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the grand foyer of my own home wearing a moth-eaten butler's jacket that smelled of camphor and decades of dust. It was tight across my shoulders, and the fabric itched against my surgical scars. Beside me stood Beatrice. They had forced her into a maid's uniform that was 3 sizes too big. It hung off her skeletal frame like a shroud. She held a silver tray of champagne flutes, her hands trembling so violently the crystal chattered like teeth in the cold. "Walk," Braden commanded, shoving me forward. "If you drop a single glass, I will send Beatrice back to the basement for a week without food." I stepped into the light. The great hall had been transformed into a casino floor. Roulette wheels spun in the corner. A jazz band played on a raised platform. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and the manic energy of greed. There were at least 50 people there. Investors, hedge fund managers, the kind of people who smelled blood in the water and mistook it for opportunity. I moved through the crowd, my leg dragging slightly. I offered drinks to men young enough to be my grandsons, men who looked through me as if I were a piece of furniture. I was Harrison Prescott. I had negotiated treaties with port authorities. I had built infrastructure that powered the East Coast economy. And now I was serving cheap, sparkling wine to grifters in my own living room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Braden's voice boomed over the microphone. He was standing on the grand staircase holding a glass of scotch, looking like a king surveying his court. "I want to introduce you to the heart of this estate." He pointed a manicured finger directly at us. The spotlight swung around, blinding me for a second. "Meet Harrison and Beatrice," he announced, his voice thick with mock affection. "My in-laws." Tragically, the dementia has taken their minds but not their spirit. They insist on working. They think this is the grand hotel they used to visit in the 50s. We let them serve. It gives them purpose. It keeps them calm. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It wasn't cruel laughter at first. It was the dismissive, pitying laughter of the elite looking at a novelty. "Look at them," one woman whispered loud enough for me to hear. "It is sweet, really. Like playing dress-up." I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I poured wine. I nodded. I played the part. I checked my watch. 11:45. Ms. Kincaid needed 12 hours. We were at hour 11. The security team was moving into position. The wire transfer was clearing through the Panama Shell Company. I just had to hold on. I just had to endure. I looked at Emily. She was standing near the roulette wheel, drinking heavily again. She saw me. She saw her mother shaking in the maid's uniform. She turned away, unable to watch the humiliation she had enabled. And then I saw her. A young woman detached herself from a group of investors and glided toward Braden. She was stunning in a predatory way, wearing a red silk dress that left little to the imagination. She looked to be about 22, Jessica, the assistant, the mistress. She walked up to Braden and draped her arm over his shoulder, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh. He kissed her on the cheek, right there in front of everyone, in front of his wife, in front of the investors. But it wasn't the kiss that made my blood run cold. It was her neck. Around her throat, resting against her pale skin, was a double strand of South Sea pearls with a diamond clasp. I stopped breathing. Those were not just jewelry. I had bought those pearls in an auction in Tokyo 20 years ago. Beatrice had worn them to our daughter's wedding. She had worn them to the gala when I retired. They were her favorite possession. They were the symbol of our life together. And now they were around the neck of the woman who was helping to destroy us. Beatrice saw them too. She stopped moving. She stood in the middle of the room staring at the girl's neck. For a moment, the fog in her eyes cleared completely. She wasn't looking at a mistress. She was looking at a thief. Jessica noticed the stare. She turned and looked at Beatrice with a sneer of absolute disgust. "Can I get a refill?" she snapped, thrusting her empty glass toward my wife. "And try not to shake so much this time. You are making me nervous." Beatrice did not move. She was paralyzed, her eyes locked on the pearls. "Did you hear me?" Jessica hissed. "Pour the drink." Braden descended the stairs, walking toward them, sensing a scene. He wrapped an arm around Jessica's waist, staking his claim. "Come on, Beatrice," he said, his voice loud and condescending. "Service with a smile, remember. Pour the lady a drink." Beatrice tried. I saw her try. She lifted the heavy silver pitcher, but her eyes were full of tears, and her arms were weak from months of malnutrition. Her hand spasmed. The pitcher tipped. Red wine cascaded out. It missed the glass. It splashed across the front of Jessica's red dress and poured down onto her shoes, her white satin Christian Louboutin heels. Jessica screamed. It was a high, piercing sound that stopped the band. "You stupid old hag," she shrieked, jumping back. "Look what you did. These are new. You ruined them." The room went silent. Every eye turned to the spectacle. Braden's face went purple. The mask of the benevolent son-in-law slipped. The stress of the debt, the fear of the mob, the arrogance of the night, it all boiled over in a single second of lost control. He didn't think about the investors. He didn't think about the optics. He just reacted. He stepped forward and swung his arm. The sound of the slap echoed through the cavernous hall like a whip crack. Beatrice crumpled. She didn't even cry out. She just folded, hitting the marble floor with a sickening thud. The tray of glasses crashed down with her, shattering into 1,000 diamonds around her body. She lay there in a puddle of wine and broken glass, her cheek already turning red. Braden stood over her, breathing hard, his hand raised for a second blow. "Look what you made me do," he shouted at her unconscious form. "Look at this mess." The silence in the room was absolute. The investors weren't laughing anymore. They were watching a man assault an elderly woman in a maid's uniform. I let the tray I was holding slide from my fingers. It hit the floor with a clang that drew Braden's eyes to me. I checked my watch. Midnight. The 12 hours were up. I did not feel the pain in my chest anymore. I did not feel the weakness in my legs. I felt only the cold clarity of a man who has acquired the target. I took a step forward, my cane clicking on the marble. Braden looked at me, his eyes wild. "What are you going to do, old man?" he sneered. "You going to clean this up?" "No, Braden," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room, clear and authoritative. "I am not going to clean it up. I am going to foreclose." And then the lights went out. The darkness that swallowed the room was not absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating blackness of a power cut. But within seconds, the backup emergency lights flickered to life, casting the grand hall in a stark, eerie red glow. The sudden shift from the brilliance of crystal chandeliers to this crimson twilight turned the party into a scene from a nightmare. Screams of surprise rippled through the crowd. The jazz band stopped playing their instruments, clattering to the floor. I did not waste a second. While the investors were blinded and confused, I knelt beside Beatrice. She was conscious, but dazed, her cheek already swelling where his ring had caught her skin. "Emily!" I barked, my voice cutting through the murmurs. My daughter appeared from the shadows near the roulette wheel. She looked terrified, but for the first time in years, she moved with purpose. She rushed to her mother's side, falling to her knees in the wine puddle, ruining her silk dress without a second thought. "Take her," I ordered. "Get her behind the bar. Do not let anyone touch her." Emily nodded, gathering Beatrice into her arms, shielding her mother's body with her own. I stood up. I reached for the buttons of the moth-eaten butler's jacket. One by one, I undid them, my fingers steady and cold. I stripped the garment off and let it fall to the floor, stepping over it like I was stepping over a corpse. Underneath, I was wearing my undershirt and trousers stained with garden dirt, but I no longer felt like a servant. I felt like a titan. I walked toward the stage. My limp was gone, replaced by the adrenaline of the hunt. Braden was standing by the microphone stand, frantically tapping his phone, trying to get the lights back on, trying to regain control of the narrative. He looked up and saw me approaching through the red gloom. "Get back to the kitchen," he hissed, his voice cracking with panic. "You are ruining everything." I didn't stop. I walked up the 3 stairs to the raised platform. I didn't look at him. I looked past him to the crowd of 50 wealthy vultures who were clutching their purses and looking for the exit. I grabbed the microphone from the stand. I didn't ask for permission. I took it. Braden lunged for me, but I turned, putting my shoulder into his chest. He was younger and stronger, but he was drunk and terrified. I was sober and fueled by a rage that had been marinating for 6 months. He stumbled back, tripping over a monitor wedge and falling hard onto his backside. I tapped the microphone. The sound boomed through the emergency speakers, a low-frequency thud that silenced the room instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said. My voice wasn't the raspy whisper of a sick old man anymore. It was the baritone that had commanded boardrooms in New York and London. It was the voice of the chairman. "Please do not leave yet. The entertainment is just beginning." A few people stopped near the doors. Curiosity is a powerful force, especially among the rich. You came here tonight to invest in a vision. I continued, my eyes scanning the room, picking out the faces of the men who had laughed at my wife. You came here to buy a piece of the future. Braden Miller told you he is building an empire. He told you he has the golden touch. I looked down at Braden, who was scrambling to his feet, his face a mask of pure hatred. "But I am here to tell you that you are not investing in a vision. You are investing in a corpse." "What are you talking about?" someone shouted from the back. "Who is this guy?" "I am Harrison Prescott," I answered, "founder of Prescott Logistics. And until 10 minutes ago, I was the ghost haunting this house." A murmur went through the crowd. They knew the name. Everyone in logistics knew the name. Braden lunged for me again. "Shut up," he screamed. "Shut him up, security!" But the security guards, the hired muscle Braden had paid to keep me in the basement, were nowhere to be seen. They had vanished. Instead, the massive LED screen behind the stage, the one Braden had used to show flashy renderings of Dubai skyscrapers, suddenly flickered. It went black for a second, and then a new image appeared. It wasn't a building. It was a bank statement. The resolution was crystal clear. It showed the account header Braden Miller, personal holdings, and below it the balance -$4 million. The crowd gasped. "That is impossible," Braden shouted, looking at the screen in horror. "That is fake. He hacked it." I signaled to the control booth located on the balcony, where I knew Ms. Kincaid's team had physically infiltrated moments ago. "Next slide," I said into the mic. The screen changed. It showed a video file. It was grainy black and white footage from a security camera. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. It showed the kitchen of this very house. In the video, Braden was standing over Beatrice. She was eating soup at the counter. Braden grabbed the bowl and threw it against the wall. He grabbed her by the hair and shoved her face onto the counter, screaming at her. The audio was clear, crisp, and damning. "You useless old leech. Why don't you just die? I need the money. Die already." The silence in the grand hall was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. The women who had laughed at Beatrice earlier covered their mouths, their eyes wide with shock. The investors looked at Braden with a mixture of disgust and fear. "That is not me," Braden stammered, backing away from the screen, his hands raised defensively. "That is a deep fake. AI. He is using AI to frame me." I ignored him. "Next slide," I commanded. The screen shifted again. This time it showed a series of text messages. The same messages I had read on the burner phone in the library. Emerald Syndicate. You have 24 hours. Braden. I will get the money. Use her finger. Send it to the old man if you have to. Emily let out a wail from behind the bar, a sound of pure heartbreak that echoed through the room. The guests turned to look at her, then back at Braden. They weren't looking at a businessman anymore. They were looking at a monster. "You sold your wife," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous low register. "You sold my daughter to butchers to cover your bad bets on Dogecoin." Braden was shaking his head violently, sweat pouring down his face. No, it was just a stall tactic. I wasn't going to let them do it. I just needed time." "Time is up, Braden," I said. I looked at the crowd. "This man does not own this house," I announced. "He does not own the land in Dubai. He does not own the shoes on his feet. He funded this party with stolen money. Money he embezzled from a dying woman and a man he declared dead." I pointed at the screen one last time. "And this is the most important document of all." The screen changed to a legal contract. It was fresh, dated today, stamped with the seal of the Panama Chamber of Commerce. It was a debt assignment agreement. It listed the debtor, Braden Miller. It listed the original creditor, the Emerald Syndicate. And it listed the new creditor, the Pegasus Group. Braden stared at the document. He squinted, reading the fine print. Then his eyes widened until I thought they might pop out of his skull. "You," he whispered. "You bought it." I smiled. It was a cold, wolfish smile. "I bought your debt, Braden. All 8 million of it plus interest. I paid cash." The syndicate was very happy to sell. They don't like messy complications. They prefer clean exits. I stepped closer to him, looming over him on the stage. "That means you don't owe the mob anymore. You don't have to worry about them coming for Emily's finger. You have to worry about me. I am your bank now. I am your landlord. I am the owner of every breath you take from this moment forward, and I am calling the loan due immediately." I didn't stop there. I signaled to the booth again. A new document appeared on the screen, magnified so every person in the room could read the fine print. It was a promissory note signed in blood, metaphorically perhaps, but the ink was as binding as iron chains. "Look closer," I commanded, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "This isn't just a loan, Braden. This is a death warrant you signed with your own greed." The document detailed the collateral. Not just money, not just property. It listed personal assets and family members as security against default. The room gasped collectively. The wealthy elite, so used to sanitized contracts and hidden clauses, were staring at the raw brutality of the underworld laid bare. "You didn't just borrow money," I continued, stepping closer to the edge of the stage, looking down at him like a god judging a mortal. "You leveraged your own flesh and blood. You put a price tag on your wife's safety. You gambled with her life like it was a chip on a roulette table." Emily, still sobbing behind the bar, let out a wretched cry that pierced the silence. "You said it was for the business," she screamed, her voice breaking. "You said it was investment capital. He lied," I said, simply turning my gaze back to Braden. "Just like he lied about the Dubai project. Just like he lied about my death. Just like he lied to every single person in this room." Braden was shaking now, a visible tremor running through his body. The arrogance was gone, stripped away layer by layer, until only the terrified child remained. He looked at the investors, his eyes pleading for salvation, for anyone to step in and stop the nightmare. But they were frozen, horrified by the monster in the Italian suit. "But here is the twist," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. that carried more weight than a scream. The syndicate doesn't own you anymore. They don't care about your fingers or your wife. They got their money. $10 million wired this morning from an account you thought didn't exist. I pulled a lighter from my pocket. I flicked it open, the small flame dancing in the still air. I held up a copy of the debt transfer agreement I had brought with me. I own you, Braden. Every cent, every breath, every heartbeat. And unlike the syndicate, I don't want your money. I don't want your fingers. I brought the flame to the corner of the paper. It caught instantly, curling into black ash that floated down onto the stage. I want your soul. I want you to know that for the rest of your miserable life, whether it's in a cage or on the street, you belong to me. You are property, and I am a very demanding owner. The paper burned down to my fingertips before I let it drop, a final symbol of his total and complete destruction. The smell of burning paper mixed with the scent of expensive perfume and fear. Now, I said, extinguishing the flame with a snap of the lighter lid. Run. The investors began to run. It wasn't a polite exit. It was a stampede. They dropped their glasses, they pushed past each other, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of Braden Miller. Jessica, the mistress, was the first to go. She ripped the pearl necklace from her throat, breaking the clasp. The pearls scattered across the marble floor, bouncing like hail. She didn't stop to pick them up. She ran out into the rain in her ruined satin shoes, leaving Braden alone. Braden looked around the emptying room. He looked at the screen that displayed his ruin. He looked at Emily, who was staring at him with eyes full of hatred. And finally, he looked at me. His mind snapped. I saw it happen. The denial broke, and the reality crashed in. He realized there was no talking his way out of this. There was no deal to be made. He was facing prison or worse. He was facing a man who owned him body and soul. He let out a primal scream, a sound of pure animal fury. You ruined me, he shrieked, spittle flying from his mouth. You were supposed to be dead. He reached into his jacket pocket. I braced myself, expecting a gun. But he didn't pull out a pistol. He pulled out a steak knife he must have swiped from the buffet table earlier. He didn't go for the exit. He came for me. He charged up the stage, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his eyes locked on my throat. I die, you die, he screamed, raising the knife. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, watching him come. I saw the madness in his eyes. I saw the glint of the serrated blade. He was 5 feet away, then 3. He raised his arm to strike, and then a small red dot appeared. It danced across his white dress shirt, moved up his neck, and settled perfectly in the center of his forehead, right between his eyes. Braden froze mid-stride, his arm still raised, the knife trembling in the air. He went cross-eyed, trying to look at the light on his skin. He stopped breathing. Drop it, I said calmly. From the high balcony where the control booth was located, a silhouette shifted. A man dressed in tactical black gear holding a long rifle leveled at the stage. Behind him, the main doors of the estate burst open. It wasn't the police. It was Ms. Kincaid. She walked in out of the rain holding a black umbrella, flanked by 6 men who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. They wore no uniforms, just tactical vests and earpieces. They moved with the silent precision of a private military contractor. Ms. Kincaid stopped in the center of the room. She looked at Braden, frozen on stage with the laser sight on his skull. She adjusted her glasses. Mr. Prescott, she said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. The transfer is complete, and the foreclosure paperwork is ready for your signature. Shall we proceed with the eviction? Braden dropped the knife. It clattered to the stage floor. He fell to his knees, his hands in the air, sobbing like a child. I looked down at him, the man who had wiped his shoes on my wife. It is over, Braden, I said. But I was wrong. It wasn't over. The legal part was just beginning. And the justice I had planned for him was going to be far slower and far more painful than a bullet. The red emergency lights finally flickered and died, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving glare of the main crystal chandelier as the backup generators kicked in fully. The sudden brightness exposed every flaw in the room. The spilled wine looked like blood on the white marble. The scattered pearls shone like teeth. And Braden Miller looked small. He was on his knees, his hands zip-tied behind his back by one of Ms. Kincaid's contractors. The laser dot was gone, but the barrel of the rifle on the balcony remained fixed on his center mass. The room was empty of guests. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the soft weeping of my daughter from behind the bar. I pulled a high-backed velvet chair into the center of the room, right in front of the stage. I sat down slowly, deliberately, resting my cane against my leg. I felt a deep, ancient exhaustion in my bones, but my mind was diamond sharp. This was not a family meeting. This was a sentencing hearing. Miss Kincaid stood beside me holding a tablet and a fresh stack of documents. She looked at Braden with the dispassionate gaze of a coroner examining a corpse. "The police are 6 minutes out." "Mr. Prescott," she informed me, checking her watch, "we have a brief window for internal resolutions." I nodded. I looked at Braden. He was sweating through his expensive suit, his hair plastered to his forehead. He tried to look at me, then looked away, unable to hold my gaze. "Look at me, Braden," I said softly. He jerked his head up. His eyes were red-rimmed, terrified. "Dad, please," he croaked. "I can fix this. We can work something out. I know where the money is. I can get it back." I ignored him. I turned to Kincaid. "Read him the options," I said. Kincaid stepped forward. Her voice was dry, devoid of emotion. "Option A," she began. "We hand over the evidence of wire fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and attempted murder to the district attorney. Given the scale of the theft and the documentation we have secured, you are looking at a minimum of 25 years in federal prison. You will be 65 when you get out. If you survive." Braden flinched. 25 years. Option B. Kincaid continued flipping a page on her tablet. "Mr. Prescott exercises his right as the holder of your debt to the Emerald Syndicate. Instead of pressing charges, we simply release you. We open the front door. We let you walk out into the rain." Braden's eyes darted to the heavy front doors. Through the glass panes, he could see the headlights of a black SUV idling at the end of the driveway. It wasn't the police. It was the insurance policy the syndicate kept just in case the check bounced. "They are still there," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Yes," Kincaid said. "They know the debt was purchased, but they also know that Mr. Prescott has not officially confirmed the transaction yet. If you walk out that door, you belong to them. And I believe the interest rate they charge involves pliers and a blowtorch." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "So, Braden," I said, "what is it going to be? A cage for the rest of your life? Or the night?" He broke. It wasn't a slow crumble, it was a complete structural failure. He threw himself forward, his forehead hitting the floor as he tried to crawl toward my feet. "Please, no, don't send me out there," he sobbed, snot and tears mixing on his face. "It wasn't my fault, Dad. It was Emily. It was all her idea." I froze. Behind the bar, I heard Emily gasp. "She wanted the house," Braden shrieked, his voice pitching up into hysteria. "She wanted the diamonds. She told me you were too old, that you didn't need the money anymore. She pressured me, Dad. She said if I didn't give her the lifestyle she deserved, she would leave me. I did it for her. I swear. I am a victim here too." He was willing to bury his wife to save his skin. It was pathetic. It was exactly what I expected. "Enough," I said, my voice cracking like a whip. I signaled to Kincaid. She handed me a pen and a document. It was a quitclaim deed, a total surrender of assets. "Sign it," I ordered, gesturing for the guard to cut his bonds just enough so he could write. "What is it?" Braden sniffled, rubbing his wrists. "It transfers everything I said. The cars, The watches. The hidden crypto wallets I know you have. The lease on the apartment in the city. Everything you have left goes to Beatrice. Today. Right now. You leave this marriage with nothing but your name. He hesitated, looking at the paper, then at the door where the SUV waited. He grabbed the pen. He signed so fast he almost tore the paper. Good, I said, handing the document to Kincaid. Now get him out of my sight. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The guards hauled him up. Wait, Braden screamed as they dragged him toward the side entrance, not the front where the mob waited, but the side where the police would meet him. I signed. You promised. You promised to save me. I promised you wouldn't go to the mob, I said coldly. I never said I would save you from the consequences. Enjoy prison, Braden. I hear the shoes are terrible. They dragged him out, kicking and screaming, his voice fading as the heavy door slammed shut. The room fell silent again. I stood up and walked to the bar. Emily was standing there. She was holding a towel, pressing it to her mother's swelling cheek. Beatrice was sitting on a stool, looking dazed, but safe. Emily looked at me. Her eyes were hopeful. She offered a small, tentative smile. He is gone, Daddy, she whispered. We did it. I helped you. I distracted him. She reached out to touch my arm. I pulled away. The rejection hit her like a physical blow. She froze, her hand hovering in the air. Daddy, she said, her voice faltering. I know I made mistakes, but he manipulated me. You heard him. He is a liar. I am your daughter. I looked at her. I looked at the diamond necklace she was still wearing, the one she had stolen from her mother. I looked at the silk dress bought with stolen money. You watched him kick your mother, I said quietly. You watched him lock her out in the rain. You knew he was starving her. You knew he was drugging her. I was scared, Emily sobbed. No, I said. You were comfortable. You liked the parties. You liked the status. You liked the money more than you loved your mother. You only helped me tonight because you found out he was going to cut off your finger. You didn't do it for justice. You did it for self-preservation. I walked over to Beatrice. I gently unclasped the diamond necklace from Emily's neck. She didn't resist. I placed it in my pocket. Then I pointed to the door, not the side door where the police were arresting her husband. The front door, the one leading out into the storm. Get out, I said. Emily stared at me. Get out where? This is my house. It is Beatrice's house, I corrected. And you are trespassing. But Daddy, I have nowhere to go, she cried, panic rising in her voice. Braden drained our joint accounts. I have no cash. I have no cards. It is raining. You have your health, I said. You have your youth. And you have the consequences of your choices. You chose him, Emily. You chose him every single day for 6 months while your mother slept on a doormat. Now you can go follow him. Or you can go find a job. I don't care. I turned my back on her. I picked up a glass of water and held it to Beatrice's lips, helping her drink. Daddy, please, Emily wailed, falling to her knees. I am your family. You fired your family, I said without looking back. Security, show her out. 2 guards stepped forward. They weren't rough, but they were firm. They lifted Emily by her arms. She screamed, she kicked, she begged. She called out to her mother. Mom, tell him, Mom, please. Beatrice stopped drinking. She looked past me at her daughter being dragged away. Her eyes were clear. There was sadness there, yes, deep, profound sadness. But there was no hesitation. She turned back to me and took another sip of water. The front door opened. The wind and rain swirled into the foyer. Emily was deposited onto the wet stone steps. The door closed. The lock clicked. I stood there in the silence, holding my wife's hand. The empire was broken. The family was shattered. But the cancer was gone. We had cut it out. And as the blue lights of the police cars flashed through the windows, illuminating the wreckage of the party, I finally let myself feel the fatigue. It was over. We had survived. Now we just had to figure out how to live with the ghosts. 3 months later, the silence of the Mediterranean Sea was the most expensive thing I owned. It was not the silence of a basement cell, or the silence of a terrified victim. It was the silence of absolute power. I stood on the teak deck of the 150-foot superyacht I had christened the Beatrice, leaning against the polished railing and watching the Amalfi Coast drift by in a haze of gold and azure. The air smelled of salt water and freedom. I took a sip of a 1985 vintage Bordeaux, the same year we were married. It tasted like victory. 10 feet away, Beatrice sat in a plush white lounge chair, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and a linen dress that cost more than Braden's entire wardrobe. She was painting a watercolor of the horizon. Her hands were steady. Her cheeks were full and rosy, the hollow gauntness of the Hamptons completely erased by months of world-class chefs and gentle care. She looked up at me and smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "Is the light good, Harrison?" she asked. "It is perfect, my love," I replied. She went back to her painting, humming a soft tune. She did not remember the basement. She did not remember the dog menu or the cold rain or the muddy shoe on her shoulder. The doctors called it dissociative amnesia, a defense mechanism of the mind to protect itself from trauma. I called it a mercy. The monster had been erased from her memory, leaving only the peace she deserved. I, however, remembered everything. I remembered every insult, every blow, every theft, and I used that memory to ensure the ink on the final judgments was indelible. Ms. Kincaid sat at a glass table nearby, reviewing a final dossier on her tablet. She looked up, adjusting her sunglasses. "The update just came in from New York, Miss Prescott," she said, her voice calm over the sound of the waves. "The sentencing hearing concluded an hour ago." I swirled the wine in my glass, looking at the deep red liquid. "And life without the possibility of parole," Kincaid confirmed. "The district attorney did not take the plea deal. The syringe Braden tried to use on you contained a lethal dose of potassium chloride. Combined with the wire fraud, the embezzlement, and the elder abuse charges, the judge decided to make an example of him. He is being transferred to a maximum security facility in upstate New York this afternoon. He will die in a concrete box, Harrison. Just like he wanted for you." I nodded slowly. It was a clean end. I had kept my promise. I didn't send him to the mob. I sent him to a place where he would have 50 years to think about the difference between a smart man and a greedy one. "And his debts?" I asked. "Written off," Kincaid said. "Since you own the debt, you technically own his commissary fund, too. We have arranged it so that 50% of every dollar anyone sends him goes directly to a charity for victims of elder abuse. He will be the poorest man in the cell block." I took a satisfying sip of wine. "And the girl." Kincaid tapped her screen, bringing up a grainy photo taken from a distance. It showed a woman in a polyester uniform with a name tag that read M. She was wiping down a greasy table in a roadside diner. Through the window, you could see the harsh desert landscape of Nevada. "Emily is currently employed at the Rusty Spoon Diner just outside of Reno," Kincaid reported. "She works the graveyard shift, minimum wage plus tips. She lives in a studio apartment above a mechanic shop. She has sold the last of her jewelry." I looked at the photo. I looked at my daughter's hands, the same hands that had held a knife to my chest. They were chapped and red from scrubbing. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked like she finally understood the value of $1. "She sent a letter," Kincaid added, hesitating slightly. "It arrived at the firm yesterday. Do you want to read it?" I looked at the tablet, then I looked at Beatrice painting in the sun. I thought about the night Emily stood by and watched her husband kick her mother. I thought about the silence she kept for 6 months while we starved. "No," I said. "Burn it." Kincaid nodded, deleting the file. "Understood." I turned back to the ocean. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and fire. They thought I was obsolete. Braden and Emily and everyone like them thought that just because I was 72, I was weak. They thought that because I walked with a cane, I couldn't fight. They mistook kindness for senility and silence for surrender. They forgot that I didn't inherit my empire. I built it. I built it when the unions tried to break my legs. I built it when the banks tried to foreclose on my first truck. I survived sharks in suits and sharks in the water long before Braden Miller learned how to tie a Windsor knot. Money cannot buy loyalty, I realized, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. It cannot buy love. Emily proved that. But money used correctly is a magnificent tool for justice. It is a hammer that can shatter lies. It is a shield that can protect the innocent. And in the right hands, it is a weapon that can obliterate wolves. Beatrice called out to me, "Harrison, come look. I think I finally got the color of the water right." I walked over to her. I kissed the top of her head, smelling the lavender shampoo and the salt air. The painting was beautiful. It was bright and open and free. "It is a masterpiece, Beatrice," I said. She patted my hand. "You are a good man, Harrison. You always take care of everything." I held her hand tightly. That was the only title that mattered. Not CEO, not millionaire, just the man who took care of everything. I looked back at the wake of the yacht, the white foam churning in the water, disappearing into the vast blue distance behind us. The past was gone. The parasites were gone. The house in the Hamptons was sold, the money donated to the research clinic that had treated Beatrice. We had nothing left but time. And for the first time in a long time, that time belonged only to us. I raised my glass to the sunset. To the old guard, I whispered to the wind, "We are not dead yet." And as the sun vanished into the sea, I smiled. The world belonged to the young, they said, but the survival belonged to the tough, and I was the toughest son of a bitch on the water. This story serves as a brutal reminder that wealth can purchase submission, but it can never buy loyalty. Braden and Emily allowed greed to blind them, trampling on filial duty and basic human dignity, only to discover that the obsolete old man they despised was a force of nature they could not withstand. The most expensive lesson in life isn't how to acquire money, but how to choose who to trust with it. Sometimes the greatest act of love a parent can offer is not giving their children everything, but letting them face the devastating consequences of their own betrayal. Cruelty to those who raised you always carries a price, and that price is often higher than life itself. If you found Harrison's high-stakes revenge satisfying, please hit that like button to support the channel. Do you think kicking his daughter out to the street was too harsh, or was it exactly the lesson she needed? Let me know your thoughts and what city you are watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story of justice served.